listening to Freedom Fastlane, presented by Capitalism.com. This is the show about building businesses and investing the profits so that you can live life on your terms. And now your host, the future owner of the Cleveland Indians, Ryan Daniel Moran.
Welcome to Freedom Fastlane. This is Ryan Daniel Moran. I believe that entrepreneurs are the best shot that we have of making the world a better place and solving pretty much every problem that we have as a society. I think entrepreneurs are the key to all of that, and I think that we are sitting probably on the cusp of what could be either the greatest opportunity or the greatest time of challenge that we've ever had, because we are liberating the job, we are liberating the 9-to-5, we are basically making it possible for anyone to be an entrepreneur. But some people don't want to build something from scratch. Some people would rather just see cash flow and go acquire that cash flow. That's kind of the rich dad, poor dad approach. I believe in that approach as well. I buy businesses myself. I also build businesses. I'm converting more over to an investor than I am a business builder. And as a result of teaching the process, I have both created lead flow for myself, deal flow, and we have created well over $100 million businesses through our students. But today you're going to meet someone who decided to skip the building process and just go out and acquire a multi-million dollar business. His name is Bill Evans. He's one of our backroom members. Our backroom mastermind is where all the elite 7-figure plus earners all get together on a regular basis, and we work on each other's businesses and share our network and work on investment strategies and work on growth and tax protection and, drink scotch in the back room and talk about taking over the world. And Bill became an entrepreneur by raising money and purchasing a very successful business. And he tells the entire story in this podcast, and he actually opens up about some things, real details about the business that I was really glad that he shared, because some people wouldn't be comfortable sharing. How did they raise the money? What were the big levers that you pulled in order to grow the business? And Bill doesn't come from this crazy internet marketing world or this e-commerce world that so many of us come from. He comes from the attorney world and from the corporate world. He had one of those jobs, or could be called a job. Apparently work for other people. It's supposed to be wild. But he did that for a long time, and then he became an entrepreneur by buying a business. So for some of you, this is going to be the fast lane to being an entrepreneur, going out and acquiring businesses. At some point, probably this year, we're going to do some sort of a training about buying and selling businesses as an investment. We're still kind of kicking that around, but we have sort of an outline and idea of what we want to do. We just don't have the capacity to build that course yet, but we will at some point. So if you want something like that, let us know on Facebook. Look for the post promoting this podcast and just type in the comments that you'd like to see a course about that. If that's something that you want, let us know. Shoot us an email or comment on Facebook. All right. So in this episode, you're going to see how Bill looked at a variety of different companies, why he picked this one. You're going to see how he raised the money and how he's grown the business since he took over. You're also going to learn some of the pitfalls that they ran into as he was turning from an attorney to an entrepreneur, and also while he was really getting the team to rally behind the new guy and build out the new vision. So you're going to enjoy this. And for some of you, this is going to be a huge eye-opener as you see that you can leapfrog the getting started process and go straight to owning $1 million business by following the same process as Bill Evans. Today, I'm joined by one of our backroom members, Mr. Bill Evans. Bill, thanks for hanging out with us.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, Bill, you have kind of a different story than a lot of people who get into this entrepreneurial world. Why don't we back up 2 years when you and I got in contact with one another and tell us what you were doing back then and what got us to this point?
Sure. So we're going back to the dark ages, really. I was working a 9-to-5 job. I was an attorney doing corporate law and commercial real estate. Definitely, I was looking to get into entrepreneurship. I was either going to start a business, and then I kind of got turned on to the idea of buying a business. And I think it was around that time when I found you, and you and I connected.
Yeah, and you had been an attorney for how long?
At that point, it was about 5 years.
Okay, so you go to school to become an attorney. 5 years later, you're like, yeah, I'm done with this stuff. That's not a small career change, going from attorney to entrepreneur. What prompted that?
I think I knew all along I wanted to end up owning my own business. And I went to law school with that kind of in the back of my mind, that at some point I would own my own business. And I actually think there's quite a few people in the legal profession who think that way, that law is a great background. It teaches you the way things work kind of behind the scenes. And then at some point it prepares you to own your own business. So that was how I was thinking. I always knew eventually that's where I would end up.
And why, about 2 years ago, did you decide to finally make the switch?
Well, I had messed around with starting a few things, and then I discovered buying and selling online businesses. So I got involved with helping people do that in a legal capacity. And, I got client envy is what they call it. And I knew, when the right one came along, I knew I was going to pull the trigger.
Tell me more about that. So did you have a client that was buying and selling businesses and you're like, oh, I got to do this?
Yeah, I did. I looked into the whole thing and I found a community where people were buying and selling online businesses. And I went to a conference, and from there, I started working with people who were doing it. And I had been doing brick and mortar M&A through the law firm. So I was familiar with buying and selling businesses in general. So just along the way, I got to know the brokers. I got to know the prospectuses inside and out. And I just kept seeing these deals come through. So I kind of had a list of what I was looking for. And once the right deal came along, I was ready.
Tell me more about that. What was the criteria as you were looking into this? What was your criteria for buying a business if you were to go down that route?
It evolved. I would say that I'm glad I didn't pull the trigger on some of the early ones. Initially I was actually looking at SaaS a lot because I like that business model, the recurring revenue. The margins can be really high. The more I got into that, though, the more I saw there's a huge amount of work that has to be done on the development side in a lot of SaaS businesses. So, I'm still excited about that business model as well. But as I kept looking at different businesses, finally some e-com ones came along. And actually, this was, 2 or 3 years ago, and my first Amazon business came across the desk. And I was just kind of blown away by the numbers that they were doing in that business and how quickly it had grown. And as I went through it, there were things I liked and didn't like. But for me, the criteria of what was appealing to me is, first, I wanted a product that I thought was well suited to e-commerce. And I think one of the things that's it may not be intuitive, but a product that's kind of complicated can be well suited because there's a lot of content you can write about that product. And a microscope kind of fits into that. I don't know if we have gotten that far yet in what my actual business is now, but any kind of product like that requires explanation or someone to call in by phone can sometimes be a good one.
Interesting.
And I wanted absolutely, and this ties in a lot with what you teach, I wanted my own branded product. I didn't want to just be reselling something else because there were a lot of businesses for sale that did that. So that was another criteria, good gross profit margins.
Well, what did you see in other people's businesses that made your ears perk up? Was it the speed of growth, the profit margins? At what point did you, if your background, was in commercial real estate and you saw like M&As and all this stuff, like why go internet route? What caught your attention there?
The growth curve definitely caught my attention, and that was something else that was really important, that the business had to be on an upward trend. A lot of sellers, I think, make the mistake that they wait until a business starts plateauing and heads downward, and then they try to sell it. And man, you can see that in the prospectus when the brokers are trying to hide that, where the financials will cut off. And it's just, for anybody who's thinking about selling, you absolutely want to do it on the uptrend, which is kind of a trade-off too, because it's like you're leaving a little bit on the table for the buyer. But that's exactly why the buyer is coming to the table, is because they want a little more low-hanging fruit for themselves as well. So for me, being in the shoes of the buyer, I was looking for that, a company that was still growing, and I knew that it was going to be a good investment from my end too.
So like, were you cash flow agnostic, meaning you'll look at any business that is doing well and that meets your criteria, or were you looking to get into certain industries and verticals?
I would say I was cash flow agnostic. Or product agnostic, maybe is another way to put it. I just wanted a widget that worked and was selling well. And, that's one of the differences between starting and buying a business too, is when you're starting, you don't necessarily know how great the demand is going to be for your product. I know there's, ways you can test that, but when you contrast that with buying a business, you have a whole history to look at, and that the product is popular. Like the original owner and the founder kind of went through that for you to figure that part out, which is another reason why buying can be appealing.
Right. So tell me about Microscope.com, when it popped up and when you knew this was the one that you were going to cash the check or pull the lever and make the decision. What stood out to you about that specifically?
So at that time, a couple things. I think one of the most important things is I was ready as a buyer. Now, I had looked at probably 150 prospectuses at this point. 2 years had passed. I was on every broker's email list. I was getting every single thing. Even if I wasn't that interested, I was just looking at it and analyzing every deal so that I felt ready, which I think is a big part of why it happened at the time it did. I actually think maybe in the early days, I missed a few when I first got into it that could have been good, but I don't think I was ready as a buyer at that point. But the other thing I really liked is at Microscope.com, we sell third-party brands, but we also have our own brand. So that was one of the major things that I wanted. And then also the split is, about half of our business is to consumers, and then the other half is B2B. So I liked that a lot too. Those were some of the major things that were appealing to me.
What was the acquisition process like for you? Because my understanding was it was a significant acquisition. So you go into this never having run a business before. There's an existing team in place. This is kind of like eating an elephant. So how'd you eat that elephant? It really was. I had run some small ones before this, so I did get my feet wet with a few smaller acquisitions, but I had bought and sold those before I got into this one. But you're right. It did. It came with employees, which is a little scary for someone when you're thinking this solopreneur kind of thing that you see a lot of on the internet. But what was really interesting about it is the team actually made things so much easier having that team in place. Once I did take over, they know their role. They know exactly how to do what they've been doing. And it was a really great way to get acclimated into the world of running this business, to have all those people in place. The part, I guess, that we're really working on now is kind of the internet marketing and taking that to the next level. So there isn't as much of a team on that side of it, or at least there wasn't. That's what I've been building lately. So what type of a team came with the business when you acquired it?
So it was mostly operations. So it came with a warehouse with, pick and pack, shipping clerks, 2 really great sales guys who just know microscopes inside and out. And then we have, a bookkeeper, financial person as well. So kind of the day-to-day part, if an order comes in, that order gets shipped out that day. And that just runs like a well-oiled machine.
So you had the operations were dialed in, but the marketing needed work. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that's a fair assessment.
Okay, so coming into this, once you kind of get your feet on the ground in terms of how operations works, you've got to go right into marketing is my assumption. So assuming that's correct, what was your plan then to say, okay, if I'm going to grow this thing, which I assume you want to do, how am I going to rally the troops to really get behind a marketing plan? How did you tackle that?
Yeah, it's interesting. In the very beginning, probably the first month or two, I just spent some time just learning everything I could about the business. I wasn't really trying to create any new initiatives or anything. I just wanted to learn how the product got fulfilled, how we get it from China. There was just all sorts of parts to the operational side of the business. So it was kind of an education for me in the beginning. Once I got comfortable with that, I started talking to the staff about how we were going to grow and, some of the initiatives we're going to be putting in place. And I think the way I tackled it, the way I got clarity on this, and I think you and I had texted back and forth about this a little bit, was I found 3 areas just to focus on, and I was able to put everything in a bucket. So on the one hand, I want to work really hard to increase our margins, our gross margins. And then the second bucket is to increase our revenue. And then the third is to reduce our expenses and improve our operations. And those might sound like pretty obvious. They probably are. But now anytime, I put something on my to-do list, it has to go into one of those buckets. And it helps me understand how that thing is related to achieving that particular goal.
So as an entrepreneur, especially a new one, opportunities and ideas are coming up all the time. So how are you filtering through those and to make sure that they're going to be the biggest driver behind those goals?
When an idea comes along, it's like shiny object syndrome. I have to look at it and think, all right, now where would this fit? Is this something that's going to improve our gross margin or increase our revenue or improve our operations? Yeah, if it doesn't fit any of those, then it just goes on my idea list that maybe at some point I'll get to that. If it does fit those, then I put it on the list. I just use Trello and I move those things every day. I'm looking at those boards and moving those to-do items up and down according to which ones I think are going to have the most impact.
You describe it like it's a fairly seamless transition between legal world and entrepreneurial world. That can't be the case. There had to be some bumps and bruises along the way. Even if it was just figuring out how to replace an attorney's salary while running your own thing and navigating uncertain waters for the first time. So bro out with me for a second. What were some of the bumps and bruises along the way?
Wow. Well, I think you're absolutely right about the salary part. You got to figure that out. And one thing I did in my search to kind of address that is I just made sure one of my filters was I just wasn't looking at businesses that wouldn't have resulted in cash flow, that was equal to what I was making after paying off financing and all that stuff. So that was one way I kind of set myself up to just kind of pre-select against that. So because that could have been a problem. And I can tell you, actually, there were a few businesses that came along that were really cool, but they were just too small. They were just a little bit too small. And I'm really glad I didn't fall into the temptation of buying those, because I think it'd be so much harder if I'm struggling with learning all this new stuff, but at the same time, cash flows are not as good. And I could just, that would have made things much more difficult. Yeah, that's the biggest thing, is to make sure that financially still in a good spot. But that's one of the beauties of the whole process, is you can kind of just screen against what you need your numbers to be and then just wait for businesses that will fulfill that. But for the rest of it, though, I would say lifestyle right now is pretty good. I don't really have any complaints in terms of the transition. In the lawyer days, practicing corporate law at a big firm like that, it's pretty challenging, and it's not always the most rewarding profession. And, you work pretty hard day in and day out. And I can't say I miss that too much compared to what I'm doing now. Not that I'm not working hard now, but it's my own thing that I own.
Fair enough. You mentioned financing a minute or two ago. That's something that I have really adjusted my viewpoint on in the last few years. I used to be very, very debt averse, and now I am much more tolerant of that. So when you say financing, what does that mean to you? And tell me a little bit about the approach you took in financing the business.
Well, I think just as at the outset, with today's interest rates, I think you have to be looking at financing some capacity. It's just so attractive. Well, for me, there was a couple pieces, without getting too detailed into the specifics. We had, in my deal, there was some portion of seller financing. And then I also had private financing as well. And we also had, an earnout component to our deal as well. So those were kind of three pieces that make up the purchase price. And I think I didn't personally take advantage of this, but I also know that SBA financing is readily available today for these kinds of deals. So I think, your financing component can take any form of those types.
And you mentioned a combination of private, earnout, and seller financing. Those are three fantastic sources. Did you just get lucky based on who you knew and how you negotiated? Is negotiating your superpower? Was this person looking to carry back some of the note? What was that like?
Yeah, I think, that is one area where maybe the legal background helps a little bit, is in the negotiation. And seeing all those deals, I started to get a feel for what was market and what I could reasonably expect. And I knew that most deals were going through with some amount of seller financing, especially when you get over a certain deal size. You would see that. Now, an earnout is a little tougher to make happen, and it also really complicates the deal. It can be appealing when the buyer and seller can't quite meet on price, because that's where an earnout can bridge that gap. So I think if you present those right, seller financing, definitely. I think almost every deal you can get seller financing.
That's amazing to me, because I perceive that most sellers just want their paycheck and they want to be done. But I guess that might necessarily be the case, because that person's going to eventually turn around and invest it for passive cash flow. So if you can be the source of that passive cash flow, why not?
Yep.
I'd be curious what that looked like in terms of negotiation, because if you could just buy businesses with seller financing, that would be very, very attractive for most entrepreneurs. So what can you divulge about that process?
Well, yeah. And just to clarify, this isn't like one of those late night infomercial real estate deals where you buy the entire thing with no money down, 95% seller financing. I'm not saying that. But, I think 15 to 30% seller financing is fairly standard. And I think the way you negotiate that is, well, number one, it is standard. So you can rest assured that almost every other offer is coming in with some seller financing component to it. And also what you were just alluding to, the tax benefits, that they're going to have to park that money anyways. And why not keep it in this type of instrument where they can just get, it's basically like an annuity. They're getting a percentage of that. Now, an earnout's a much tougher sell, because that is contingent. Like, they may not get that money ever, with an earnout. So that's harder to get those.
Yeah. And you're kind of tweaking my mind a little bit, because it was actually Jay Massey, our friend of the show and speaker at Freedom Fastlane, encouraged me once to think about businesses as deal making rather than purchases. When we look at, if you're going to buy a business, that person doesn't just want a check. They want something on the other end of that, which is usually cash flow. So why not just give them the cash flow and you can keep the big check, which I had never thought of before. You're the first person that I've heard do that. And it's, even if it was just a percentage of the company, that's fairly interesting. The rest of the financing came from private sources, you said. Was that it? Just you raised money yourself and came up with either an equity deal or a debt deal with those individuals?
Yeah, that's essentially it. It was a debt deal. That was pretty much how we did it. Now, at the same time, I was all lined up and ready to start looking at SBA financing if needed. I just decided not to go that route. Like, the deal was approved for it. And, the only reason that I didn't do it is just because the length of time it can take to get an SBA loan, and it can add some complication to it. But it's absolutely an option these days.
So this all is irrelevant if the business doesn't grow and or perform. So your first order of business was to come in and grow and to dial in the marketing. So it can also be kind of a tweak on your mind if you're not growing and paying that debt and then paying yourself. So how has the experience been for you in learning how to grow a business and applying marketing strategies that you're learning along the way? And how has it affected your happiness positively or negatively? Are you more stressed or less stressed? Just tell me about that process, like first 100 days coming into the business and growing it.
Yeah. Okay. First 100 days, probably the biggest thing was just that after a month or two, the realization that this business is what it was presented to be. There was nothing was hidden, and it really did the numbers they were claiming it did, and the revenue and all that. Because, you can review everything. You can review tax statements, which we did, financials, but you can't be 100% sure, until that money is coming to you and you're responsible for the expense.
Yeah.
So that was a good feeling that it was what it was represented to be. Now, after I get past that, now we start looking at how we're going to grow this, and my happiness and stress levels with that is, it's fun. I mean, it's stressful, but it's like a different kind of stress. It's exciting. I've been going to these conferences. I've seen you at a few of these things, and it's just this constant, I don't even know the right word for it, but you just your mind is just getting overwhelmed with all these ideas and strategies of stuff you can do. And I think that's what's so exciting about an online business is it's like there's an infinite number of things you could be doing to grow or improve your business.
Right.
And the problem is, how do you implement all of it?
Yeah. So how do you implement all of it besides putting it into strategic buckets? How do you navigate that?
So right now, my basic strategy is hiring freelancers and teams. That, it depends on what the task is. But like, for example, we just designed a new package for one of our products. So I go on 99 Designs and work with a bunch of the artists there and end up with a package after a couple weeks. Versus, like, obviously I'm not going to try to design a package myself with Canva or anything like that. But, I try to outsource the really technical stuff. I've also got a really great technical developer who works on the site. It runs on Magento. So, there's those skills that require like serious technical knowledge. So I outsource those. And then I try to put myself in a position to kind of manage and oversee everything while outsourcing kind of the more artistic and technical requirements.
How did the team take to having a new leader when you came in?
Well, that's a good question. And I would say this, first of all, I really lucked out with the team. And I'm not saying that to brown nose them. They're probably not even going to listen to this. They're not like internet entrepreneurs at all, but man, I really did get lucky. They're great and they know their jobs well. As far as how they reacted to me, I think they were curious to see what was going to go on. The prior owner had owned it for quite a while. He had actually bought it 10 years ago. So he took it through a 10-year stretch and did pretty well with it. But I think they were, what they've said to me is that they think it was time for some new blood and someone to come in and get excited about it again and really try to take it to the next level. So yeah, I think the team's pretty happy with the transition.
It had to be surprising for them to hear that there was a new sheriff coming into town. Did you have any pushback? Did you have any people say, I want my share? Like people is just a different problem or a different opportunity than just looking at financials. So what happened with the personality behind the business, if anything?
Yeah. So I would say 90% it was good. Like the key sales guys are happy and excited. They're still like plugging away, and I involved them in a lot of our strategic decisions. So that's all great. However, I would say there was one instance with one employee who I think saw it maybe as an opportunity right at the transition to try to make some demands in terms of pay increases and things like that. So it was a pretty big test, I would say, as a new owner right in the beginning to have that happen. And this person was in a role that you probably could consider critical. And I guess I was just put to the test at that point. Like, what was I going to do? Either succumb to the demands or let him go and figure out what we would do. And I ended up letting him go. And, we had to work pretty hard, me and the remaining team members, to figure out how to fill that gap. But we've done that. And I think the business is stronger for it now.
That's a bold move, letting that person go. What'd the team react to there, where first order of business, big boss Billy comes in and lets somebody go? That had to be a bit of a shocker.
It was to some of the team, but I also, some of the more senior salespeople, I, kind of had taken in as counsel on that and discussed it with them, and they thought it was the right move as well. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
So you're sitting in a little bit of a unique position where you were an entrepreneur a couple years ago. You wanted to make that pivot, and you make the decision. You go through bumps and bruises, but you've come out on the other side. Looking back on it, would you do anything differently? Or really, what I say, how do you feel about the decision to make such a drastic change in your life? Because there's people listening to you say, yeah, I'm Bill 2 years ago. So on the other side of it, what do you say looking back now? Yeah,
the thing I would say, the only regret I have is I wish I did it sooner. I really do. It's been great. It's been great for our family life, everything. We've been able to travel a little bit more because I can work from a computer, just laptop, anywhere. And it's just fun and exciting. I feel like being alive today with these entrepreneurial opportunities that are occurring online and just kind of anything related to digital business. It's just so exciting. And I'm just really grateful and happy to be able to be a part of that.
And not just the online opportunities, but also the funding that's available. You couldn't get funding for an internet business just a couple of years ago. Right. You can do that now, and you've proven that. And the other thing is the upside. You don't have that type of upside in real estate or in really any other investment but your own business. And dare I ask you, how big do you think Microscope.com can get in comparison to the level it was when you acquired it?
Well, my goal conservatively is I want to 3 times it in a short period of time. I don't know if it could get bigger than that. Maybe. Depends on how big our vision is. But versus a brick and mortar business, because I had considered that as well. And there were some for sale in my town. But I just don't think it was as exciting to me just because I don't know how much I would grow, for example, an old 100-year-old furniture company.
Right.
Like, you might be able to grow that, but you're not going to 10x that business, I don't think. Maybe you are, but an online business, it's realistic to do things like that.
Yeah, 100%. And what do you think are the pivotal strategies or relationships or decisions you've made that will make that possible and inevitable, that 3xing or 10xing of the business?
Yeah, definitely getting involved in the networking and getting to know other people who are doing the same thing. That's one of the challenges I've had. I live in a small town, and there's literally 0 people that do what I do, that even make any kind of living off of the internet. So you don't have a peer group to discuss ideas with. So you got to find that online. And there's a lot of groups like that. And you can go to meetings, conferences like Freedom Fastlane Live. Obviously, I've met a lot of great people there. And I've been going to more events like that, getting to know people. It's both, you benefit from the networking where the people can help you out if you have a problem. But the other thing is you get to see other people doing it. And then it doesn't become such an outrageous idea that you might 10x a business because you're talking to someone who just did it. And those stories are not totally uncommon in those circles.
Yeah, there's like a normalization that happens because you just normalize the idea of, this person's tripling their business, so I guess it's possible for me to do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so what advice would you give to somebody who is Bill 2 years ago, who's listening to you talk right now on the other side, and you're like, I just want to get there? What would you tell them now? Or what would you tell yourself 2 to 5 years ago?
I think you can either go the route of starting something. I think there's a lot of good frameworks for that now. Because when I was starting, it wasn't entirely clear how you would do that. I know there were some courses floating around, but it wasn't like they were proven yet. You didn't know for sure. But I think now there are routes if you want to start your own thing. But if you want to buy a business and kind of just take the shortcut, you can start looking at all the broker websites and requesting prospectuses. I think that's where it starts. That's how you start to learn all the different business models that are available, the going prices, and just start talking to those brokers. That's what I did. That's what I would recommend.
Well, Bill, I'm so excited to see what you do moving forward. We've been at this, a year now? When did you close on it?
We closed in July, so 7 months. Yeah,
so you are still fresh in your career, and the business has grown, correct? Or at least stayed stable?
Yeah, we're growing.
Yeah, so you have such a bright future ahead for this business and all the other businesses that you're a part of. I'm so proud to be a part of this journey, and I'm so excited for where you're going next. So, Bill, thanks for hanging out with us. Where can people follow you, or where can they track the business, or is there any place where they could follow your progress or see what's going on, or is it just the business, Microscope.com?
No, if people are interested in the buying part, it's kind of funny. When I was looking, I set up a website just so I would have all the links in one place that I could go to. I've got all the brokers' links up there. I've got resources up there. And I was kind of just using it as a convenient way to be able to hop around on all those websites. Awesome. But yeah, I set that up. It's digitalbusinessinvestor.com. And it's nothing pretty, but it's useful. When you get on there, you can always just go back to it. And I've got all the brokers listed, and I've ranked them all so you know which ones are reputable. the marketplaces, and I'm adding stuff to it. It's just kind of a resource for anybody looking to buy a business.
Cool.
Online.
Yeah, we'll definitely link to that in the show notes of today's episode. You can get that at freedomfastlane.com. Hey, Bill, thanks for hanging out with us, man. Congratulations on what you're doing. We're so excited to track your progress moving forward.
All right, man. Thanks, Ryan.
If this process sounds interesting to you, if you know that there are businesses that are profitable, that people don't want anymore, that people are trying to sell, and you want access to deal flow, or you want to raise the money to be able to do that, you belong in the tribe. The tribe is where we take investors, we take successful business owners, brand builders, audience leaders, and we put them all together to create new opportunities and new experiences. So people buy each other's businesses, they invest together. I even invest in our students. That is one of the primary ways that I invest my profits. I invest them into our students because I believe in this model. I believe in what we are doing. And the tribe is kind of our online Shark Tank, where people bring product ideas and they bring businesses that are doing well or starting out. They partner with other people, either in mastermind groups or actual partnerships, like they pool their money together and they invest with one another, and we help grow them because our retail partners are inside of the tribe. And we have marketers inside of the tribe who create funnels and know about building audiences and are using those strategies to promote their businesses, especially their physical products businesses. We also get together and do things like our tribe summit, where we play kickball and sit around campfires and mastermind with one another. And our best people give presentations on how they're building multi-million-dollar businesses. That's what we do inside of the tribe. It is application only because we keep the level of conversation really high. If you're just starting out, you should go through one of our boot camps to get started. But if you're at the level where you are ready to really go big on this, you can go over to freedomfastlane.com/tribe to fill out an application. We'll look at it. And if you're a fit, we'll bring you into the tribe. Or if you're not ready yet, we might kick you back to one of our boot camps so you can get to the level where you need to be so that you can come back into the tribe. So Bill bought one of these $1 million businesses that someone else had built. And he said, I run $1 million business now because I bought it. And he went and joined our highest level mastermind, which if you run a 7-figure business or you have a net worth of at least $1 million, you can apply for that. It's called our Backroom Mastermind. Just shoot us a message or go to freedomfastlane.com for a link for the Backroom. Hey, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. For some of you, this is a big light bulb moment, seeing that you can leapfrog the process and just go and buy a business. If you want more on this kind of stuff, 2 things. 1, you should go listen to the podcast episode with Shaquille Prosla. He does this on more of a smaller scale than what Bill did. And it's going to show you how, even if you're just starting out, you can start buying Cashflow. But also let us know, because we've thought about doing a product all about this specifically. And if that's of interest to you, we want to know. So shoot us a message or comment on Facebook and let us know that. All right, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Post this on Facebook and tag someone that you know. Tag someone who you know who's looking to be an entrepreneur or was looking to invest their profits. This might be the most profitable hour of their time that they spend this year. So post this on Facebook. Let us know your thoughts about this. As always, we appreciate your support, and we'll see you on the next episode.